creating. In addition to this, we have another view, which is basically just another view on the same set of data that we call a diagram. And this diagram is going to allow us to delve into further amounts of detail than we could on that previous map. So in this case, we may add a decision to decide, was our talk accepted? If not, perhaps we're going to evaluate. And then maybe we want to try again next year and go back to the beginning. We can also add swim lanes. A swim lane represents a person performing some particular action. So let's say Alex and me. We can drag our items into other swim lanes to represent someone's going to perform that action. We can also drop items on top of other items. We can move them to other lines. I'm just going to make a mess here to show you that we can fill this out into more detail. Here we have collapsible subprocesses so the user can decide what level of detail they want to see on these particular diagrams. Now for those of you who are thinking to yourself, we've implemented Visio on the web. What's so big about that? Well, there's one very important feature that is a lot of benefit to business users who are using our application, and that is that Blueprint has a very sophisticated positioning and routing algorithm involved. As you saw me sitting here dragging these various items around and inserting things, that I didn't have to worry about where I was going to put everything. Blueprint basically did all that work for me. So it removes the temptation from the user to spend countless hours fiddling with their lines and fiddling with all of their individual objects. Blueprint basically does all of that work for you. Now, we do have the ability for the user to change some of that. So, for example, I can take activities and I can position them on top of other ones. So we can do vertical things like that. So there's a very limited set of things that the user can do. But for the most part, Blueprint is going to take care of that work for us. So what this means is that we have a fairly computationally complex application here. And what that means for us is that we don't have a lot of extra CPU cycles or computational cycles that we can spend doing interesting things like handling user events or dealing with other user interaction. Unfortunately for us, there's also another significant constraint, and that is many of our users are corporate business users, where they have little or no control over their own computers. They can't install software, they can't install plugins or anything like that, and many of them are still running on IE6. And unfortunately, the JavaScript engine in IE6 doesn't perform very well. But because we want users to be able to get onto Blueprint and start working very quickly without having to install anything, even if they can, we need to program sort of to that lowest common denominator. So we needed to come up with a diagram that would be able to function even under IE6. And IE6 is what we're using here. To show you some of the scale that we're talking about, I'm going to insert a link to another process that we've already created. And I'm going to open that process up here. This process is going to open up into a much larger process that's going to be more complicated. But I'll give you an idea of some of the scale of some of the types of processes that we can create in Blueprint. So here we've got something that has lots of sub-processes, lots of lines that cross over the whole diagram. And we were able to draw it in somewhat of a reasonable time. Now, some of you may be thinking that that was a little slow, and it would be if that's how long it was going to take the user to continue making changes to this diagram. Now, I've got an ace up my sleeve, and I'm going to explain how we deal with that later in the talk. Now, what you see here is not